Let's face it, business technology is frustrating and complex. So how do you make sure it works for your team? To make IT right, start the discussion at go-domain.com. You're listening to Discussions by Domain, a podcast for business leaders. Our discussions may be with people you've probably heard of before, but the majority of our guests are in the trenches, professionals like you and I, with the same challenges and struggles of keeping up in the Northeast. They're implementing strategies, overcoming hurdles. They're leading the fastest growing businesses in our region. My name is Anthony DeGraw, Director of Partnerships at Domain Computer Services, and the host of this show. When I'm not talking with business leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of Domain and the ups and downs of our own growth journey, as we intend to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome to another episode of Discussions by Domain. I'm your host, Anthony DeGraw, Director of Partnerships over at Domain Computer Services. We are bringing Jeremy Davis back on, outside sales executive here at Domain as well, to answer more questions about our process, managed services, and all types of questions that organizations may or may not be thinking about in regards to managed services. So this segment is called Flip the Script, where Jeremy takes over control, and I'm going to give it to him now.
Thank you, Anthony. It's great to be back. I was thinking for today's topic, we've discussed thus far the 4 blocks on our last episode, but I was curious in putting myself in the shoes of a prospective customer, as I've done throughout the Flip the Script series. What would it be like if I engaged Domain Computer Services in terms of the sales process? And I know we have a very specified process here. I was hoping we could use today's podcast to discuss that process from the prospect lens.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and one that we get a lot if we've moved on or done a good job in explaining how to deliver IT services the correct way, which we've covered on other episodes. And inevitably, we will get to the point of like, how do we do this? Like, how do we work together? And the answer is we have a defined process that we go through that we think works best for both us and the prospective client. But there is one thing that I do give hesitation to especially internally here at Domain, but we always have to be thinking about how the client wants to buy. What is their buying process? And where we can potentially get in trouble and a client could potentially get in trouble is that it looks very linear, right? I'm sharing my screen now. We're going through our process. It's a document. It looks very like you do this, then you do this, then you do this. The problem with that thought process is that that's not how people actually buy things. Even when Domain is going out to the market to get a new software program for, let's say, accounting, or we're looking at a CRM system or whatnot, it's not a very linear process. It can kind of be all over the map and timelines change. So with that in mind, we always adjust our process to the buying process of the customer to make it fit their needs and answer any questions or concerns they may have. But where we start out with is pre-COVID, it would usually be kind of one step prior to this, which was like a discovery call, meaning, hey, you've raised your hand and you've said, I need some assistance around here. I'm looking to learn more. Jeremy or Anthony jumps on the phone with you, asks you a couple basic questions around what's going on, where are you at today, what are you looking to change? Could be a quick 10, 15-minute conversation. And then we move from there to let's schedule 30 to 45 solid minutes where we can go deeper onto this, the challenges you're facing, where are you looking to go, kind of your current situation and your future situation. And then once we get through that and kind of how your business operates, how your employees do their job, what is the goal? How do you serve your customers? From there, we then transition into the 4 blocks or how we deliver IT services to make sure that makes sense. To do that conversation properly in its entirety, you need about 30 to 45 minutes to do that. So we usually take that first call as a 10 to 15 minutes, kind of getting to know you, that kind of stuff, and then move into a scheduled allotted time where we can really dive into it. That we call the strategy meeting or the technology strategy session. And once again, what is your current technology situation? We need to understand everything. What are your line of business applications? What does your technology environment look like? And then the second part of that is, where do you want to go? Like, where are you trying to bring your business? Where are you trying to bring your technology? What has been lacking? And through that questioning, we usually uncover very similar problems across multiple different industries in how they're handling that. And then we can build the understanding of where we can solve those problems for you in the 4 blocks that we were talking about. So I would reference, and I'm going to reference 4 blocks a lot here, or the domain approach. And if you haven't listened to that, I recommend you go back and listen to it. But that's really in the strategy session is really where we're going to dive into your current situation, where are you looking to go, and how the way we approach IT managed services may solve those problems for you. Anything you wanted to add there, Jeremy, or a follow-up question on that technology strategy session?
Yeah, so just to quickly break it down, the strategy session is more discovery, as I understood it. So it'll be to understand the current environment, perhaps gaps in their environment. And then that leverages itself if we determine that there's a fit into a longer meeting, in which case we're also discussing business objectives, where technology wants to go, and ultimately into our service delivery, including the 4 blocks. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, that's a great summary. Very good.
Is there any instances where that's all accomplished in the strategy meeting, or is it typically broken down step by step? You mentioned accommodating the buyers where they are in the process. How many times would you say that all of those things are uncovered in one initial meeting versus 2 separate?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a 50-50 percentage. Like I mentioned, pre-COVID, we would do a quick intro call. And then if it made sense, we'd come on site and do your standard business meeting where we had the physical give outs and we would walk people through that in person, get to know each other a little bit more, understand more about the company, where you're located, everything like that. Now, during COVID and even in a post-COVID world, it's happening where we're turning more and more of those initial calls, as long as the individual has the time, into the full-blown meetings to present everything from where they're at to how we deliver services. So I would say it's still about 50-50. We still have people with the initial introduction where they have 10 to 15 minutes. And then let's see if it makes sense to move to the full-blown meeting. And then others that we start small and then it grows into, let's just keep this going. I have a full hour open, and, we don't need that much time, but they're in the mode, they're already thinking about it, and we can just cover our ground as quickly as possible.
Got it. And Anthony, if things go well on the second meeting, so we've discussed the 4 blocks and our approach to service delivery, what would be the next step as a prospective client? What should I be thinking about next?
Yeah, so we kind of end that first meeting with the following pieces of information if we're able to. And it's in our quest to constantly be as transparent as possible. So we will end that first meeting with the following information. One, if the 4 blocks and the domain approach to IT services make sense, and you confirm that as the organization and you want to move forward with that method, we will do our best. We will do as much as possible to give you what we call a range or a number on a napkin. Kind of what would it take? What is the initial range or cost that it would take for us to deliver this full-blown complete IT solution to your organization as it sits today in this meeting based on what we know? The goal of that is because we are typically more expensive than what an organization is paying. We find that usually most organizations are currently under-investing, and they're looking for better results, so they need to invest more in those results. So we give everybody that number on a napkin or that range to deliver that solution, so they know exactly where they stand. And they can have a conversation about it right then. they could take it offline, whatever the case may be. But we try our best to come right out of the gate and give you that. So you know exactly where we're going to be. There's no cat and mouse games. We're not trying to hide pricing from anybody. Now, the caveat to that would be a couple different things. I have, 6 or 7 locations. I have teams that are remote completely. And then I have one office over here that has, 50 people in it. Another thing could be different industries have different setups. Not everybody is an office worker. So you could have a company that has 50 office workers, but then they have 2,000 service-based professionals that are out on the road. One that comes to mind most recently is a janitorial commercial cleaning business. They have 50 people running the day-to-day operations in the typical office setup. And then they have 2,000 people across the country doing the actual work, being the actual practitioners. So in that sort of instance, or with multiple locations or, cloud environments, when things start to get a little confusing, we really can't give a number on a napkin like we would like to do, because we don't fully understand what we're walking into. So all those things need to be taken into account. But let's take it a step back and say, simple, one office, 30 people in there. We're going to give you a range on what it would take us to deliver those services. From there, if that makes sense and it's doable for your organization, the next thing what we do is what's called a paid technology assessment and gap analysis. So there's a couple reasons for this. The first reason is it gives you a true experience with our VCIO, our Virtual Chief Information Officer. It gives you them on site to do a full analysis of your network. What does it currently look like? What gaps are there? Business continuity, disaster recovery, cybersecurity gaps. How can we fix those gaps? Let's provide you the solutions to those. And then let's give you a budgeted range of what it would cost to fix all of those solutions or all of those gaps. And then we break that down into business impact, high, medium, and low, which the organization can then implement themselves. They can go to another third party, or they can utilize a domain to do that for them as well. This is giving the company the first taste and feel, kind of a lower commitment to domain and how we work, how we operate, who are our engineers, who would be the VCIO, that entire experience. So we do a paid technology assessment. It is an on-site assessment. We don't plug anything into anybody's network. Our engineers are actually bringing pen and paper to go through everything, the server room, the closets, the workstations, all of that, to see how everything is set up. And we heavily discount that for people or organizations that are going through the managed IT services path with us. They're walking through this journey with us. For instance, you can come to us off the street and get us to do that, and it would cost a lot more. So we don't want you to be fully out of pocket for that, and we actually do incentivize it if you do move forward with us. That assessment is going to give you a lot of details. It's going to give you exactly what's wrong with your environment, and most likely it's going to find the root cause of all those issues you explained to us in that first meeting. So I'm going to pause there, Jeremy, and see if you have any questions for me on that technology assessment, which is the second step in our buying process.
Yeah, so you mentioned there that if for organizations going down this path, in other words, considering domain for managed services, it's heavily discounted, even to the point that if they decide to move forward, I don't believe they're charged. I guess my question here is, what if an organization ultimately, for any reason, decided to go in a different direction, aside from the experience, the lower commitment experience as to what it would be like to work with our team and an introduction to our senior engineers, what else might they walk away with of value, even though they're not moving forward with us?
Yeah, great question. So the technology assessment and gap analysis is its own deliverable, meaning that this document, whether we're there or not there, somebody can read it and they can execute on it. The second part of it that I think is very valuable is it's not just technical, meaning we're going to find a gap and we're going to explain technically how it sits in your environment and why that's wrong. But then we're also, under that finding, going to do what we call an executive summary, meaning in layman's words, why should you be concerned about this gap? And that executive summary is focused on the individuals in the room or at the organization who aren't technology savvy or technically savvy, and they can understand the impact that that is going to have on their business if the issue is not fixed. And then the final piece of it is, what does it cost to fix this? A lot of people, say they'll do assessments or whatnot, and it never gives them the solution. They're still left holding the bag on, great, I know it's wrong. How do I fix it? So not only do we give the fix, but we also give the approximate cost here in the Northeast on the labor, the hardware, the software components to fix that thing. That way, a company can budget it out. So we always like to try and plan things out in quarters. So if we're breaking things into business impact high, medium, and low, you should probably focus on the high things. You now have the solution to it and the estimated cost. And for your business, you can kind of estimate out over the next quarter, if we wanted to fix all the high items, this is approximately what we should budget for that. So it's really giving what we call a technology roadmap to an organization that probably never had one. A lot of the concerns we get in our initial calls with people or frustrations is that I had a bunch of unexpected costs that came to my plate that nobody ever prepared me for. Or I have no idea where I'm going or what should I be planning or budgeting. So people are usually willing to make a budget for technology and cybersecurity and all of these things, but they need to have an idea. And that technology roadmap, this deliverable is its own deliverable. It's, in my opinion, extremely valuable. And it gives that organization, probably for the first time, where they should be going. And one of the interesting facts is that a lot of CIOs, so CIOs that are internal, chief information officers that work for companies and may even have their own internal, 6 to 10 person IT team, they find these documents extremely valuable as well. So when we're connecting at that highest of level and helping the CIOs in New Jersey, New York, and Philadelphia understand their environment more clearly, and then also be able to communicate that to their CEO and CFO and use that deliverable to then go get more budget to put in the things they need to do. That, to me, for a small business is extremely valuable. And it's a great way for an outside third party to come in and be unbiased in how things should be set up and delivered.
I agree. The way I see that is, regardless of the direction of that prospective customer decides to go, whether it's with domain, as we hope it is, or a different provider, or ultimately they keep it internal, like the example you gave, they have that roadmap. So I agree with you on the value. So we get through the technology assessment, and then we have a clear understanding of business impact, high, medium, low. We have a roadmap. We can budget, plan for the future. Let's suppose that this prospective client is still of the mindset that domain is probably the right partner for their IT support. What would we be looking at next past the technology assessment?
Yeah, so we don't just flip this over to the individual, the company that that's moving forward. We actually have the engineer who was on site come in and present those gaps, those findings. Why is it important? How do we fix it? So the engineer that actually came is going to be in this, what we call a solutions presentation meeting. And they're going to walk you through each finding. And once again, they're going to explain the technical piece for the technical people in the room, and they're going to explain the executive summary for the non-technical people in the room. And we're going to start at business impact high, the most important, and we're going to go all the way through low. And then they're going to explain the solutions as well and what it would take to get those things done. But that's it. It's a on-site technology assessment. And then pre-COVID, we were also present our solutions in person at your location. We've had people come to our location to explore our facilities. But you're going to get that engineer, that outside third party from our organization, to come in and actually explain these things to you, your executive team, whoever it may need to be, to fully walk you through, and you can ask as many questions as you want. You can explain different situations, right? A lot of times we find something and there's a specific reason why it hasn't been addressed or it hasn't been fixed. And that's great knowledge for our team to understand and then work together on a potential solution. A lot of times people will come to us and say, yeah, like the reason we don't have that in place is because X, Y, or Z. And that's just it. That's the end for them. Well, the answer for us may be, okay, that's great to know. What's the next best way to do this? Not just put a line in the sand and, you know, put your pole in the ground and mark it complete, because that's just the way we do it. There's usually another way around it to accomplish the goal that the solution provides, instead of just saying, we can't do that because of X. So we find that come up, and that's really good for clarity across both organizations. And the final piece of it is great for CFOs and CEOs to be in the room with IT managers or CIOs internal when we're doing these things. A lot of times we're able to help these IT managers and CIOs get budget or explain why they've been asking for something for so long. It's really cool to see the breakthrough come for those individuals when Domain presents this to them, so they can fully understand the gravity of, it's not, you know, Joe, the IT manager, has been begging for more budget and we don't know why. It's, oh, this is why. This is how you should have communicated it to us. So I hope that, you know, presents some more clarity. So first step, technology strategy session. If it makes sense, we move to the on-site technology assessment. Step 3 is we're going to come back and fully present that technology assessment and gap analysis to all the parties that should be there. And step 4, to move to the next step, if you don't mind me getting ahead, Jeremy, is that we realize that this is a lot of information to take in. It's technical. It has big impact on where you're trying to go and what you're trying to do. It's a different way of delivering services than you're probably used to from an IT perspective. And what we typically do is we schedule what's called a Q&A or a next steps meeting, where questions can be asked, like, okay, this is all great. You've presented all this information. You truly know what you're walking into. You know what we have in place. You know what we're trying to do. And there may be more questions that come of that. You know, like what are the minimum standards to get on board with Domain? You know, how would you service this, or this? So there's a bunch of things that come up, and we understand that. And usually the team needs to get together, the 3 to 5 individuals that are part of this decision, and really walk through what are their questions, what are their concerns. And our fourth step is putting a step in there where we can have just a full Q&A period to answer all of those concerns.
Sounds great. In that final Q&A, is it often being are concerns about certain packages being discussed, or perhaps even narrowed down? Are we working around concerns in pricing, or perhaps less so on pricing and more so on the best pick option in terms of the packages that Domain provides? Would those types of things be discussed?
Yeah, so very good question. So in that piece of that solutions presentation, part of it is, hey, in step 1, we told you approximately in a range what it would take for us to manage it. Now in step 3, we can really dive in. We can give you an exact answer. And as Jeremy mentioned, we always try to give companies options. We want to provide at least a minimum of 2 options, if not 3, to allow your team the flexibility to decide what makes the most sense for you. We know that squeezing you into one pigeoned product is not the way that most people like to buy. So we give options. And in that would be questions about, hey, how does option 2 compare to option 3? What do I get here versus here? So yeah, we're really kind of narrowing in and allowing the team to select what option makes the most sense for them, and answering any questions around that selection as well.
Cool. I'm curious. So if in that last strategy session, we're narrowing down packages as part of the conversation, let's suppose hypothetically that this prospective customer has a good sense of which package and they've heard everything they need to hear and they've discussed it internally. So maybe I'm rushing ahead, but I guess my question here is, when we reach the point of we're ready to partner with Domain, what do the next steps in that process look like? Every company has unique onboarding procedures. What does onboarding with Domain look like? What does the timeline around that look like?
Yeah, so the first step is we usually end the Q&A, if it makes sense, of what option would you like to move forward with and when would you like to get started? And it's very simple. Option one, and on, let's call it, we're shooting this on 9/23, so October 1st, right? Okay, great. And they'll typically ask, like, how do you, if there's a current provider in place, which there usually is, how do you work with them? What's the transfer of knowledge? And they're concerned maybe about, the relationship there, which we've handled, because we're a growing business, we handle these conversations almost weekly. So with that being said, we always like to tell them, in an ideal scenario, we'd like a 2-week overlap with the current provider. So meaning that Domain comes on 10/1 and your current provider leaves on 10/15. So we have 2 weeks together. That way the Domain team can go in there and gather as much information from them, and we can communicate directly with them as you're continuing to pay them, so they have the need to be able to respond to our requests. But we work with them to transfer that knowledge. That is it's extremely helpful for our team and for you as the customer, because we can just go directly to them and ask them all the technical questions that we need to ask them without having to have a middleman or somebody in the middle of this trying to work with us. It also takes the burden off of our customer or you for trying to gather this and manage relationships and all of that. It allows you to continue to do your day job while allowing us to work in the background with your current provider to do what we would call an onboarding and they would call an offboarding. So we like a 2-week overlap. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, and we've dealt with this multiple times as well, is the relationship with the current provider goes extremely south. And we almost have like what's called a takeover incident, where we just need to come in and start supporting right away. We're kind of going in blind, other than our assessment that we just did, usernames, passwords, things like that. That knowledge transfer doesn't happen. This can also happen when you have internal IT that you're looking to replace. So maybe you have one individual that's just not doing that great of a job. You want to come in with a Domain where you have multiple employees and a full team approach to this. If that offboarding of that employee doesn't go well, there can also be this takeover or held hostage mindset. We operate in all these different scenarios, but the ideal situation, whether it's internal or it's an external third party, is that we're going to have an overlap. With that, so that's how we deal with the current provider or the current situation. The second part of that is how does your team, this is a big switch, this is a big move. How does your team start working with us? Who's on their team from Domain side of the house? So what we do is what's called the 5th step here is a kickoff meeting. And the kickoff meeting is very specific. It's to introduce you to the entire team that's going to be handling you going forward. So we're going to have our service desk manager who's going to walk you through how to get support and all of the things that goes on with that. Then we're going to have what's called our network administrators, or your primary and secondary account engineers, and at least one of them at the call or in person when that goes back on, understanding who's going to be showing up to your office, who's going to be working with you all the time. The next thing you're going to work with is your account manager or customer success manager. So when you don't need a support issue, but you need new laptops or printers, or maybe you are having a support issue and you need some feedback, that individual is going to be part of your team as well. And then the final piece of that is what we call the VCIO. So who's going to be your primary VCIO and the introduction there. So now you're going to have this true kickoff experience on who's part of your team, what does the next 2 weeks look like, scheduling out some meetings with not only your VCIO, but also your account manager. And then from there, the final piece of that is the project. If there's any type of project or technologies that we have to put in place, there's going to be a project coordinator and a project engineer. and walking you through what does that look like as well. So we understand that this is a big move. We understand that companies don't switch IT providers every single day. We understand that IT is integral to the way people do business every single day. So when you make this type of switch to get a better result, we need to start the relationship off really well. And we've done that by designing these kickoff meetings.
Super helpful, Anthony. In terms of the timeline for this, again, going back to the prospective customer, if I was considering engaging Domain Now for the first time, but I was really likely to move forward as a partner, how long should I expect this whole process take? And I understand that the team would likely work with any timeline, but if I didn't have a specified timeline, about how long from step one to step 5?
Yeah, very, very good point. So obviously, let's start over at strategy session. That's going to happen. Let's call that week 1. So we'll meet with you on that. If everything makes sense and you get back to us the same week, most likely we'll be able to schedule out the technology assessment on week 2. The technology assessment happens week 2. While we're there, we're going to be scheduling the solutions presentation, which could be as quickly as the next week. So week 3. And then it's really up to the company on how quickly the Q&A and the kickoff meeting happen. But that could also typically happen the next week after that. So all of these are about a week. So I would say the quickest we've probably done this is in, as short as 2 weeks, and really trying to dram this through because of a unique situation. On average, you're going to be probably 3 to 4 weeks of this entire process, going through. I would say anywhere from 4 to 5 weeks is probably average from start to finish on walking through this. If it's a clean process and both parties are ready to move forward and there's not anything really holding them back. Obviously, like I mentioned, it could go as quickly as 2 weeks and it could take as long as, 10 months we've seen from organizations that are really trying to wrap their brains around this. But I would say the average is about 4 to 5 weeks.
Got it. What advice would you have for a prospective customer who might be getting ready to reach out to Domain Now in terms of what they should expect in this experience? And I don't have anything in mind here. So what general advice would you have for that person?
Yeah, my advice to anybody that's, going to reach out and talk to a managed IT service provider, just to explore, like, what does it even look like? Maybe they haven't engaged in a provider yet and they're just like, hey, I think we're ready for this. Or somebody that is currently with a provider and they're looking for a better experience or more solutions or direction and guidance from a higher top level individual. Is really come to the table with an open mind and then be as transparent as possible in the process. And then the third piece of it would be, to keep an open mind, right? This is, we don't come in and tell you how to do law. We don't come in and tell you how to run your business or work with your customers. And what I mean by that is we do this every single day for, hundreds of clients and thousands of endpoints. And we've built out these processes over 24 years to really run this as efficiently as possible and give you the best experience. So when going through that, a customer should understand that a well built out buying process or sales process, whatever you want to call it, is really made to enhance your experience and make it as seamless as possible. We come across a lot of organizations that'll just give you a price based on users or servers or whatever. You can call them, they're going to ask for these data points. They're going to regurgitate out a number to you and say you can start tomorrow. And my cautionary tale there is that if that is the case, what do they know about you? How do they know your business? Do they know the technology you even have in place? Do they work with that technology? If you've been having all of these issues, how are they going to fix those if they haven't looked at anything or maybe found the root cause? So there's a very defined reason and methodology as to why our process looks like this. And we find that it's the best fit for the prospective customer. And it's also the best fit for us to make sure that it's a seamless experience when we finally do engage. So take your time. This is a big decision. It involves a lot of parties. It affects the entire organization. So make sure you're not just quickly, the lowest price in this case and for this specific offering is not what I would be looking for. Where you invest and the amount that you invest is going to correlate to the results that you get and the experience that you have.
So Anthony, I love what you said there about it was buyer beware on the lowest price, but also the quickest turnaround option. In other words, we speak with a lot of prospective clients who have mentioned that scenario where they reach out to a support provider and can get started so quickly. And while we've walked you through today our process and we have the ability to accelerate that, it is important that that provider have a specified process and not be turning around as quick as tomorrow.
Yeah. No, very, very good point. And obviously there's some people, I just dealt with this where we got a call on, somebody had the strategy session. I did another one with the other partner. 2-3 weeks of silence goes by. And then all of a sudden Friday at 4:30, I get a call and says, send me something this afternoon to sign today to start support. And I had to be completely frank and that's not going to get you the experience that you want. It's only going to cause frustration for you and for us. And, you just want to take your time. You want to think through this. And I would say once you've gone through that technology strategy session with say 3 to 5 different providers, I would really narrow it down to the 1 or 2 that, felt the best for you or that seemed the most professional or whatever criteria you're using to guide your decision. And then go through those processes with them to truly get an understanding. We've been told a lot of times that, domain is, potentially not the first choice, but, 1 of 2 or 1 of 3. And then by going through this process, we've clearly defined that we know who you are and that we can support you and that this is how we would recommend or the options we would recommend for supporting your business to get the best results or to get the results that you want. And it takes a little bit more time. But based on our customer satisfaction surveys, based on our employee surveys internally, I think it's delivering the right outcome for all parties in the relationship.
Agreed, especially since we're going to be working together so closely. To your point, it is important to take your time, make sure that you know and like and trust the people that you'll be working with. So couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy, thanks for flipping the script again and getting us on the same page. This was not something I was thinking about walking people through. Hopefully it adds some value for anybody considering managed IT services or anything for their business. I think people should invest more in learning the different processes to bring anybody on board. I think the time spent up front can really affect the results later on in the relationship, as you've mentioned. So thanks for doing this again and running another episode. And I'll be on again with you next week.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me back, Anthony. We'll talk next week.
See you, man.
To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device. To help us get the word out, share with a friend, leave a review, and check out our discussions on the web at go-domain.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.